Well, good morning and good afternoon to all of you that are on the line. This is Andy Yost with the Capacity Building Center for Courts. We're here today for our CIP All Call. With me today facilitating is Crystal Duarte and Scott Trowbridge and Victoria Sweet, and as always, David Kelly. So I'm actually going to hand the microphone over to Crystal here today, and she's going to kick us off. So Crystal, are you there?
I'm here. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. So as Andy said, my name is Crystal Duarte. I'm with the Capacity Building Center for Courts. I have the pleasure of working directly with Region 9 as a liaison, but I also get to work on some of our focus areas like ICWA and trafficking. So here today we're going to talk about the ICWA curriculum as well as a few other things. Our intent for the next hour or less is to release and introduce the ICWA curriculum, talk to you a little bit about how your liaison may help you with implementing the curriculum if that's something you're interested in doing, and elicit ideas from you around capacity building supports that you would like to have available to improve your state's ICWA compliance. So as Andy mentioned on the call today, you'll be hearing from members of our internal ICWA work group, and that includes Scott Trowbridge, who many of you know, Victoria Sweet, who's with the National Council and with the Capacity Building Center, and she'll be supporting the tribal CIPs, and Andy Yost. Also on our work group, we do have participation from the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. I think Scott is next going to give us a little tutorial on our webinar room, just to familiarize you with everything that it can do.
Yeah, thank you. So if you're looking at the screen now, you'll see the PowerPoint. You know what that is. We've got the ability to put up different windows here. We've got some notes. We've got the chat window that we will use a lot. You will see the list of people that are attending. You can chat with them privately, or you can chat with everybody in the main window. I think importantly for this particular call, you'll also see on the right, you'll see a set of files. Some of these were sent out by email, but some of them are large, or altogether they're large. So you could download those files now. There easily be other ways for you to get them later as well. But if you wanted to download them right now, you could. If you click on those, you should see the option for download. Right now, I think we want to test the chat, make sure everybody's in there and can use that. So our question is, what's the likelihood you're going to stick to your New Year's resolution this year or next year? 1 is, yeah, right. No chance I'll even make it past Valentine's Day. And a 5 is guaranteed. Another year, another notch in my belt. So we can start that chat. Seeing a lot of people typing, so looks like you all have found the chat window. Anything else, Andy or Crystal?
No, that sounds good to me, Scott.
Yep.
So now we're going to jump into the first sort of phase of our time together here. And you'll see that we just kind of rearranged the pods a little bit. What we want to do is do some polling to kind of get us started. For those of you that are on the line, if you have your phone unmuted, if you could just mute it while we walk through this poll, that would be great. Thanks. So what we want to do is just kind of gauge the nature of ongoing ICWA-related projects among the CIPs. So what we're going to do is we're just going to open up a poll here. And there's really 2 steps to the poll. The first step is to respond to the poll that's in the top center of your screen. Which of the following best describes the status of your ongoing ICWA project? So take your time and read through that. You'll notice that the questions kind of track the CQI change management process that we've been working with CIP. That is, we, the Center for Courts, has been using in our work with the CIP. And if none of the options in the box at the top on the top poll represent where you're at with your work, go ahead and click Other, which is the last option there. And if you click Other, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that there's sort of short answer poll. Just jot down in a sentence or so, or maybe just a bullet point thought, where you are, how you would describe the status of your ongoing ICWA project. We'll use this information to kind of get a snapshot of where states are, and the data will provide us a snapshot in terms of where states are in their ICWA work, and it will also generate organically sort of a list of things that we might be missing in the way we're thinking about ICWA. So I'll be quiet now, and I'll give everyone a chance to respond to the poll.
Whether the data say it's working once we have a chance to collect it. We haven't collected anything yet. We've monitored interventions. We don't have an ongoing ICWA project because it's currently not a CIP priority. Well, we've already implemented something. I think it's this one. We have ongoing ICWA projects or two, but honestly, we just did them because we know ICWA is important, not because we have a ton of data.
All right, looks like we still have a couple people responding, and which is great. We'll want to make sure we give plenty of people time. I realize it's a bit wordy as a poll in comparison to some of the previous polling that we had out. So we'll give it just another second here for folks to type in. Looks like we have a number of people that are in that other category.
How do I vote?
Great. All right. So it looks like the polling has slowed down. Obviously, there's a number of people that say they don't have an ongoing ICWA project, but it's because it's currently not a CIP priority in the state. And then we also have a number of folks that said other. And then there are also, looks like about 22% of people that are currently implementing some kind of ICWA intervention. So that's good for us to know, and that's data that we can use as we think through the way the Center for Courts prioritizes its work. So now what I'll do is I'm going to jump over to our next screen, and rather than you telling us what you've been up to, we're going to take an opportunity here to poll you one more time. I promise you we won't poll you the entire 60 minutes, and just get a sense of what would be most valuable from us or you with regard to ICWA. So there's a poll in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you'll just take a second to respond to that poll, I'll set the timer here for 2 minutes. We'd appreciate it. Thanks. Great. All right, we'll take about 20 more seconds here to make sure everyone gets a chance to respond. Just a couple more responses coming in, we can see. All right, wonderful. Thanks so much for that. So here's the good news. The good news is that we internally at the Center for Courts and the ICWA working team that Crystal mentioned earlier have been working on all of these items. So the good news is you don't have to pick and thinking that if you pick one, the others won't come out. So surprise, we're working on all of them. What we wanted to do is use this opportunity to poll all of you and find out which one you wanted the most. And then obviously if something like an ICWA infographic isn't as useful to you as we might have thought it is, then that's good. We can allocate our resources accordingly. So we appreciate your feedback, and it's clear there that the ICWA compliance measurement tools are something that are valued from the people that are on the call in CIP. So that's also good to know. So internally, just one thing I wanted to say before we jump into the curriculum itself is that the Center for Courses developed an ICWA work plan, and included in that work plan is developing all of these tools, including ICWA compliance measurement tools. So now that we know that from the CIP that's a priority, and that CQI consults, which my guess is would probably dovetail nicely with the compliance measurement tools, are a valuable service that you all would like to receive, then that allows the ICWA team internally to prioritize those efforts. So know that these polls are not just fun ways to interact with technology, that we take this data seriously and we use it to drive our efforts so that we're providing things that are of value to you. So with that in mind, we'll move now to the ICWA curriculum piece, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to Crystal.
Hello again. I'm going to give a brief overview of the curriculum. I know you've all received it and you've set aside time during your vacations to sit by a warm fire and read it. I'm sure of that. But I'll go over it really quickly, and we'll have time to answer questions later, I know, as well, and get your feedback. So the development of the curriculum began in 2013. A group of experts was brought together to determine what the essential elements of such a curriculum should be. All of that information was taken by the authors, which included Dr. Sophia Gutowski, Scott Trowbridge, Victoria Sweet, and myself, and we used all of that information to put it into the curriculum. So it's a compilation of things we gathered from several experts. It was piloted in Minnesota in August of 2014, both with a CIP group and then as a live training, a live multidisciplinary training. So you probably noticed it was intended to be a judicial curriculum, but it can be delivered multidisciplinary as well. So it's also been updated to include the revised guidelines, and we'll talk more about those portions later. So the overall goal is really to provide consistent training that is still adaptable to each state. It's intended to be delivered over the course of 1 to 1.5 days, but it can really be customized. Each module can be changed and adapted. It's meant to be delivered in a building block approach, but again, it can be rearranged with an understanding of audience needs. It should be co-taught by a tribal and non-tribal trainer. Likely a state court judge might be one of those trainers. You may also have a tribal court judge or a tribal community leader interested in delivering portions of the curriculum. It includes 6 modules and multiple activities within each module, and there are also pre- and post-training evaluation tools. The first module is really just an opening, and that would be a culturally appropriate opening we would recommend. That would invite a tribal elder or a community leader. It also includes the video Bringing Our Children Home, and in one of our other screens you'll notice the box where you can download different materials and resources, and we have a link to that video. You may have seen it. It was developed with the Mississippi CIP a few years ago. The second module is the historical and cultural perspective, and that's the module that is really the heart of the curriculum, and we recommend that any delivery of it includes some portion of that. What's included in the curriculum is a national historical context, but it can and should be modified with local history. It also is a place to begin with local or national data about why this remains an important issue. Module 3 is the ICWA key components, and that gets into an examination of reasonable versus active efforts. You would need to add state laws there if you have any state ICWA laws. And faculty in that section really connect each provision to specific points in history that ICWA is intended to remediate. The fourth module is ICWA hearing best practice, and that's where we have an option to use a case scenario or a mock hearing to kind of liven things up. Module 5 is the leadership role of the judge. So what can judges do on and off the bench? How can they collaborate with tribal judges and leaders? How can they reach out to strengthen those relationships in order to improve compliance? And the closing is, again, we attempted to do a culturally appropriate closing with a talking circle. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about how you might modify the curriculum. That would really begin with doing a training needs assessment, or if you've done any baseline ICWA compliance measurement, that might help you to understand where you need to begin and what modules you need to emphasize. So you could deliver it in a variety of different ways and different lengths as well, taking that information. And that's something that your liaison can also be really helpful with, is helping you to identify what pieces of the curriculum may be most appropriate based on where your state is at. So I think with that, Victoria Sweet, who we have discussed, she's part of our CBCC team. She's going to be working with tribal court improvement projects, and she is also a national leader on federal Indian law. She's going to talk a little bit about how the 2015 BIA guidelines have been incorporated.
If we've muted you, Victoria, it's *6. Your name didn't show up, so.
Is that working now?
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Crystal. Hello, everyone. As Crystal mentioned, we wanted to make sure that this curriculum had the most updated version of the most recent revisions to the guidelines. The curriculum, while it focuses on the statute and the requirements in the statute, also takes a best practices approach. So the previous, when we initially wrote it before the new guidelines had come out, there were a lot of references to the ICWA guidelines that came from the BIA. So we went through and found every instance where we spoke about best practices, specifically according to the BIA guidelines, and we updated them. So here on your screen is one example. Previously, in the previous guidelines, it talked about factors that are not considered good, or that are considered good cause for not transferring a case from state court to a tribal court. The new guidelines go through and they actually really emphasize when you would not consider good cause to not transfer. So you can see we've got it all highlighted. We have it referenced to the new guidelines, and it has the new recommendations. So everything should be updated, and in case the regulations do come out, which we still don't know anything about, but if they do, then everything would be also updated according to that. And if anyone has questions about this, like I said, we know it's best practices. We know it's simply advisory language, but we wanted to make sure you had the most updated version. And I think that's pretty much all we have to say about the 2015 guidelines, unless anyone wants questions later. And now I think
that's great. Thanks.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, if there are questions, as always, we'll have a burning question session at the end of the webinar. So if anyone wants to pick Victoria's incredibly intelligent and capable brain about the guidelines, then you'll have that opportunity. So I'm just going to say a couple of things here about two items. One is expand a little bit on Crystal's comments about the CBCC's role, your liaison's role in supporting the deployment of the curriculum. And then just a couple brief comments about training evaluation and how that might look with the ICWA curriculum. So the first piece is what sort of is the role of the Center for Courts and the liaison in relationship to the CIP using this curriculum. And really, I would invite you to think about it sort of four areas of expertise that the Center for Courts can offer CIP. The first is obviously our legal expertise. We're staffed with a number of attorneys and have access, obviously, to a number of national folks who know a lot about ICWA, and not to butter her up too much, but Victoria is among those folks, and she's worked incredibly diligently on this aspect of the curriculum. So know that we are available to help you work through vis-a-vis consultation with your liaison, the process of modifying the curriculum to meet your needs within your state. So legal expertise is the first. Second, we also have instructional design expertise. So Scott and Crystal both have done a lot of work in developing this course from an instructional design perspective. And the Center for Courts has the resources through a consultation to help you think through modifying the curriculum to meet your needs from an instructional or pedagogical or education theory perspective as well. The third area of expertise that we can offer in support of your deployment of the curriculum is CQI expertise. You all know Dr. Alicia Summers well, who's been doing a good job with the Center for Courts internally, helping us all to become, I don't want to say experts, but at least proficient in the CQI process, although we do have a number of experts like Vicki Weiss who can help you with the continuous quality improvement piece in the deployment of the ICWA curriculum as well. And then fourthly, of course, the cultural competency piece. So any questions that you have about navigating the curriculum with regard to cultural competency and making sure that the issues that arise when addressing ICWA in a child welfare environment are addressed from a culturally competent perspective, the Center for Courts can also offer those areas. And I'm sure that there are other areas that my colleagues are thinking right now, oh yeah, Andy, don't forget to mention X, Y, and Z, but at least as a starting place, the role of the liaisons is not, of course, to come in and teach the curriculum in your jurisdiction. Our job is to help you build the capacity to deploy the curriculum in a meaningful way in your jurisdiction. And so there are at least 4 ways in which we can help you do that. The second thing I wanted to talk a bit about was evaluation. So an outstanding question with any training is, did it work? So what I think is very intelligently built into the curriculum design itself is a training needs assessment. So, and that's in one of the files that you were sent, and it's available on this webinar as well. You have access to a training needs assessment that will allow you to do some diagnostic research on the front end before you deploy the curriculum, and can inform the modifications that you make to the curriculum for use in your training. And of course, the Center for Courts can help you sort of sift through that training needs assessment as well and make sure that it's used in a useful way. There's also a pre and post test component to the curriculum, so there we can do some real measured learning from the beginning of the course to the end of the course. And then there's also an opportunity for the CIP to reach out to the Center for Courts and have us work with you to develop additional evaluation instruments that might give us some longitudinal perspective on the efficacy of the training itself, you know, whether it's 1, 3, 6 months out. We could help you develop focus groups. There are learning action logs. There's a number of different training evaluation tools that we could help you develop from a CQI perspective to measure the value of using the curriculum in your jurisdiction. So just know that that's out there, and as you consider using the curriculum, know that your liaison in the Center for Courts is here to support that work and make sure that it's done in a meaningful way. So lastly, I'm going to pass the microphone on to Victoria and Scott here, who are going to give you some tips and tricks for deploying the curriculum in your jurisdiction.
Thanks, Andy. As was mentioned by Crystal, we actually did pilot this in Minnesota a few months back. Scott and I were both part of the team that piloted, and we got a lot of feedback from the multidisciplinary group and also from some CIPs that we worked with in a previous meeting. And one of the big things that came back to us was a question about how much time to spend on the context and on the historical part of the curriculum. And while we absolutely recommend that you need to have context in there, because we found that when you're trying to go through all of the law, you still need to understand the why. You still need to understand the history of why this law was put into place. But there are a couple of approaches that you can take. One approach is simply to do it as the modules are arranged and have a full module and a full segment just devoted to talking about the history. Another option, and this is an option that I've used in some of the trainings I've done, is to begin with a portion of the history and then to start weaving the context and the history through the law. So, for example, you might be explaining about the need to ask. Why do we always have to be asking? Why do you have to maybe ask more than once to make sure that this child may or may not be eligible for ICWA? That you can get into the history talking about how the tribes have been treated over the years, about stereotypes, about why someone might be afraid to admit in a court that they are Native, why they might be concerned that that could negatively impact their case. And you can weave some of the history through the legal examples so that you can also show them the context and why the law was was written the way that it is and how they work together. So you have some freedom, and we're hoping that the way that these modules are written, it gives you plenty of information so you can find the approach that will work best with the audience that you're addressing. Another thing that we noted, we have some PowerPoints, especially when we start going through the hearing sections, and it talks about the different findings that need to be made and the levels, the burdens of proof that need to be met in each of the hearings. The PowerPoints can be a little text heavy. You need to prepare your facilitators that they don't just go to these text-heavy slides, but that they truly get into their own experience, their own knowledge, what they've done with ICWA, stories that might help illustrate to cause it to go a little bit more smoothly. It's too dry and too legal for an audience to sit through slide after slide of text unless the facilitators are really prepared to bring some life to the law. Scott, did you have some more examples?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is I felt like this curriculum recommends having a co-trainer that's from a tribal community. And the other thing that I thought was remarkable about the Duluth pilot was that we had caseworkers, supervisors, attorneys from the state and from the tribe, both caseworkers that work for the state but were members of nearby tribes and some that worked for the tribe as well. And going through this subject, I mean, there were people that clearly were friends and, had been friends a long time but didn't know that the things that led up to the passage of ICWA had affected their colleagues. And so even beyond having the co-trainer, if it's somebody that is local, that's great. And I think you can have sort of a side effect of this is some great relationship building. That's the only thing I was really wanting to add.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And thanks, Victoria. So if anyone on the line did not take copious notes about the tips and tricks that Victoria and Scott just provided, that's okay. So know that you can reach out to us, and we're more than happy to work through those and kind of nuance that conversation even more through that consultation process that we've been mentioning throughout the webinar. So at this point, what we'd like to do now is open it up for questions. David is on the line. The Center for Court staff is also on the line. So we'll invite you to ask any burning questions you have about the ICWA curriculum in particular, or general CIP questions as well that are appropriate for the webinar call. So we ask that you ask questions in one of two ways. Either use the raise hand icon, which is in sort of the top center of your screen. You'll see there's a little person with their hand raised. If you just hit that button, Scott and I will see that you've raised your hand, and then we'll call on you over the phone. That's option number one. Option number two is you can just type into the chat your question, and we'll kind of keep track of the questions as we go along. We'll read them out loud for the group, and then we'll try to field them as we go. So I'll go ahead and just open it up now I'm sorry, actually, before I do that, David, is there anything that you wanted to say prior to the Q&A session?
No, thank you, Andy.
Okay, thanks, David. So then I'll go ahead and open it up for questions and answers now in the burning questions portion. See a couple folks are typing into the chat, so we'll give them a second as well. We may have record time for CIP All Call this week. All right, so Tina asks, can you make all the documents available for download again? The short answer is yes. We'll do that right now. It looks like Scott's moving some things around, so we'll put those up on the page. To download those files, all you'll do is just click on the file, and then when you do, the download file button will open up on the bottom of your screen. Just hit download file and it'll drop it right into probably into your downloads file on your computer.
Andy, I'd also note another way to do it is if you click on the little icon in the upper right of that pod, that window, you can download all at once.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. For those of you that aren't on the chat, Crystal also is noting that there are PowerPoints that are available, but the file is very large, so it's best to just request from your liaison those PowerPoints, and we'll get them to you one way or another by passenger pigeon or Dropbox or several emails perhaps. Got a couple more questions coming in here. So, again, if you want to ask a question over the phone, that's totally fine. Just click your raise hand icon and we'll call on you. All right, so we have one more question here from Heather. Scott or Crystal, maybe one of you that piloted in Duluth could answer this. The question is this: how was the circle at the end of the training facilitated, and how did it turn out?
This is Victoria. I can jump in on that.
Sure. I'm sorry, Victoria.
Oh, you're good. We actually had an elder from the community. He was a spiritual leader and an elder that the community recognized, and he was the facilitator for it. So he just invited everyone to stand in a circle, and I actually, and Scott, you can give your impression as well, but for me, it was a very, very powerful and very good way to end it. People were able to express some of the things that they gained, some of the things that meant a lot to them from the experience, and it was sort of a bonding thing for both state workers and tribal workers that were there together.
Yeah, couldn't say it any better than that.
Excellent, thanks. Looks like there's a couple other people that might be typing into the chat here. You got plenty of time. A couple more people still typing. Kind of a quiet crew today. Maybe everyone's concerned about their holiday shopping. I know I haven't started mine.
Well, Andy, this is David. I'm more than glad to fill some of that silence. I just want to reiterate to everyone on the phone that this is one part of a larger series of resources that Andy discussed earlier. The ICWA is and will continue to be a top priority under the CIP, and that we really encourage all of you to think about whether there are certain parts of this curriculum that may be useful to you, or whether you already have a curriculum in place in your state, if this may help supplement in some way. Encourage you to reach out to your liaisons to learn more, to talk about ideas. And I'm really excited about the other pieces of our ICWA agenda that are coming down the pike. In addition to that, I want to make sure everyone is aware of a forthcoming funding opportunity announcement from the Children's Bureau that I am exceptionally excited about. A forecast has been posted and updated fairly regularly on grants.gov, and I know that it's also gone out on the CIP listserv. But we expect the funding opportunity announcement to be available in April, and the purpose of this grant will be to promote state and tribal court, or I should say state and tribal partnerships for ICWA implementation projects. I'll be sure to post the forecast again, but it's never too soon to reach out to tribal neighbors to talk about this opportunity. It'll be funded at $1.4 million for 5 years. We expect likely to make 4 awards. And the idea is for state government and tribal government, and in particular CIP programs, to work together to take a hard and honest look at how ICWA is or is not implemented well in your state and across tribal partners, and to look for creative ways to improve things. You come up with a plan to do that and spend the next 4 years implementing that plan and looking to see if progress is made. So keep an eye out for the forecast. I see this curriculum and all the forthcoming resources and that grant opportunity all as complementary pieces that can really, I hope, help us better understand how to more effectively implement ICWA and support all of you in improving those outcomes. So that's it for me. Maybe folks have finished typing their questions by now.
I think we do have a question from Amy. What, if any, challenges did you encounter in delivering the training, especially with judicial staff? If yes, how were they managed? I think over the years, one of the biggest challenges we've had in delivering it with judicial staff is the length. I think a day and a half is a long time to take judges away from the bench, and so one of the ways that we have gotten around that is to do that training needs assessment. So if you can take 3 minutes of their time at the front end to let them know that you're going to really design a training that's going to be applicable to what they need, I think that helps a lot. A lot of the times judges have done some part of the history, or a lot of times people think they know the history because they learned it in school. I think the curriculum does present a little bit of a varied view of that and opens some people's minds to things that they didn't know about, especially if you deliver a local version of it. That's something that Scott mentioned in the pilot that a lot of people didn't know about. So I think those are some ways that we've gotten around some of those challenges, but I think the biggest is to do that training needs assessment up front.
Yeah, and I was trying to remember if I could characterize anything like that in Duluth, and I don't really remember any challenges with the judges. I would note that there is some guidance in this curriculum on, some stuff that's not maybe the most ICWA specific, but just dealing with, challenging groups as a trainer. And I think part of the thought is that if you have a good judge that you think shows good leadership or understanding of child welfare, that there's enough information in this faculty guide that you could really help get them up to speed, both with the knowledge of ICWA and also comfort level of being able to deliver the training. And I think it's near the beginning, maybe around page 30 or something. I couldn't find it really quickly, but just talking about some tips for trainers that would apply to a lot of different trainings, but as specific as the authors could make it to this subject matter.
Great. Thanks, Scott and Crystal and Amy and Lisa, those of you who are engaging in the chat conversation as well. Appreciate those thoughts. I thought I might take a second here to just sort of expand a bit on what David mentioned with regard to the Capacity Building Center for Courts broader ICWA work. As I mentioned earlier, internally we have a work plan, and the work plan covers the next few years, frankly, and some of the projects that we're working on that are captured in that work plan, we've already talked very, very briefly about, and I think I'm going to take a second here to kind of just run down the list. I've dropped the poll back in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen that you took earlier, which asked, which of the following would you find the most useful to advance your ICWA work? Obviously, a number of people talked about ICWA or voted for ICWA compliance measurement tools, which are any kind of instruments that we could help you develop to measure whether or not ICWA is being fully implemented in your jurisdiction. So know that that's a piece that the Center for Courts is working on and is a cornerstone of our work plan going forward. Second item, I'll just kind of run down the list here that you can look out for this February, that is February 2016, is the ICWA Constituency Group, which we'll be launching. You'll hear more about that soon. We'll be hosting it on Adobe Connect. We'll be using what's called a community of practice model. You don't have to worry too much about that lingo right now. When we launch the constituency group, it will be for CIP or their designee to come in and sort of troubleshoot issues that are related to ICWA compliance together. And we have a structure that we've developed, and actually that we stole from from Xerox Mechanics. I'll tell you more about that someday. They know we stole it though. To manage the constituency group, those of you that have participated in the PL 113183 sex trafficking constituency group, you'll see a similar kind of structure in the ICWA constituency group. To know that that's coming down the pike. Obviously, the ICWA curriculum you now have in your hands. That's a universal service that we've worked diligently to deliver. I have to admit, personally, I was a bit sad to see that the ICWA infographic got 0 votes, but I still have hope, and I'll only say I'm disappointed because I'm kind of a tech nerd and I like infographics as a tool. But for those of you who don't know, an infographic is a visual representation of statistics or related ideas that the infographic is built to make more digestible complex information or statistics. So the idea behind the ICWA infographic would be hopefully an interactive infographic. That is, it would be clickable that you could look at to sort of think through how an ICWA analysis might look or how ICWA compliance efforts might look in your state. So we're still in the early stages of conceptualizing the infographic, but the idea is that it would be a tool that you could use in your state to promote ICWA compliance and make and sort of express the idea or articulate the idea of ICWA compliance and its importance through a new use of multimedia, that is the infographic. Another component that we're working on is the CQI consult piece. We've already done a CQI workshop around legal representation. Some of you attended that a few weeks back. So know that we can provide sort of 1-hour CQI consults that we have already been providing to the different states. And then also there's the potential for something a bit broader than that, depending on what the ask is sort of around the ICWA CQI component. So we're working on the consultation package that would map on top of all of the other efforts that we're doing. And then finally, there's an ICWA online educational experience, which is the language that the collaborative uses. And what we mean by that is an online course that we'll be able to develop and offer and host on the collaborative's website that CIP would be able to access as well and interact with. So in terms of the broader package and the work plan, those are some of the deliverables that we're going to be working on and that you'll see in the relatively near future. So again, I'll stop here and see if there are any other burning questions. If not, then we'll wrap up a bit early. All right. Well, I see that no one's writing in the chat, and we have no raised hands, which is totally fine. We'll jump over to the closing session now. And like always, we'd like to get some feedback from you on the value of this format. So the question that we're going to ask you to respond to on your way out the door is, it's slightly different than what we normally ask. This question is, was previewing a CVCC universal service, that is the ICWA curriculum, a useful way to spend our time together? So what we want to know is whether or not the CIP All Call from your perspective, is the appropriate place to introduce you or to these universal services or preview them with you. So on your way out the door, if you will respond to that poll, that'd be very helpful. Unless there are any other closing remarks, you're welcome to go, and hopefully everyone has a happy holiday season and a new year, and we will be in touch. Thanks, everyone.